All right, here we have the nasal cavity. The entrance to the nasal cavity would be the external airways, which are the nostrils. The air enters the external airways, and then it enters this space called the nasal vestibule. Nasal vestibule. And from there it goes to the nasal concha. These are they. There are three. You have a superior, middle, and inferior nasal concha. The nasal concha have two functions. Number one, they filter the air. Nasal concha are covered by mucous membrane that secretes mucus that entraps part of the dirt and debris that you inhale. Between the nasal concha, you have these grooves. These grooves are meatus, M-E-A-T-U-S. So this is a meatus between the nasal concha. In the roof of the nasal cavity, you have olfactory nerves right here. These nerves that you see, the white nerves here. Olfactory nerves enable you to smell. Enable you to smell. Okay. The boundaries of the nasal cavity will be the external airways and the internal airways. The internal airways are in the back of the nasal concha, right here. Okay. All right, the nasal cavity then leads to the nasal pharynx. The nasal pharynx, you have two structures that you should know. In the back of the nasal pharynx, you have the pharyngeal tonsil. Pharyngeal tonsil is also called the adenoid. Tonsils are lymph nodes, or major parts of our immune system. Also in the nasal pharynx, you have the entrance to the auditory tube. Okay, entrance to the auditory tube, right here, 410, entrance to the auditory tube, this slit here. Has two other names, eustachian tube and pharyngotympanic tube. This is a tube that leads from the nasopharynx to the tympanum, which is the eardrum. Okay, tympanum is also called the tympanic membrane. All right, the boundaries of the nasopharynx are the internal airways and the soft palate. This is the soft palate here. Okay. The nasopharynx leads to the oropharynx. The oropharynx is the mouth. In the mouth, you have two tonsils. In the back wall of the oropharynx, you have the palatine tonsil. The palatine tonsil, the back wall. And the lingual tonsil you don't see here because the tongue has been removed, so you don't see the lingual tonsil. But you do see a salivary gland. This is the submandibular salivary gland. We'll talk more about that next week. Submandibular salivary gland. Okay. All right, the boundary of the oropharynx are the soft palate and the base of the tongue. The oropharynx now leads to the laryngopharynx. The laryngopharynx actually leads to two structures. It leads to the larynx and the esophagus. This is the esophagus behind the larynx and the trachea. Okay. All right, so the boundaries of the laryngopharynx are between the base of the tongue and the larynx. Above the larynx, you have the epiglottis. This is the epiglottis that folds over the glottis. This is the glottis here. 118 is the glottis, and on each side of the glottis, you have the vocal cords. So 416